Next project, building a replica of the Space 1999 Eagle hangar. Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to another Industrial Modeler. What I have is another interesting project here to share with you. I'm going to be creating a replica of the hangar that housed the Eagles on Moonbase Alpha from the show Space 1999. As you know, Space 1999 had some beautiful model work done for that show. I was always astounded at all the different designs and the ships that we would see on screen, and one of the things that we occasionally retreated to was a brief look or glimpse at the hangar that housed the Eagles. Now back then we had no way of replaying these scenes, so you just whatever you saw was what you got a glimpse of on screen. Now of course we have all kinds of screenshots we can get access to online. Certainly if you have the DVDs you can replay these scenes, and when you do so you can really appreciate all the beautiful work that was done for these brief sequences that we got to see on the show. Alright, just a quick background story here how this whole thing came about. The files I'm going to be using here are designed by Marc Fraley. They are available on Thingiverse for free, and I'll provide the link below. And as you recall, Marc did an outstanding job creating additional files to finish off that Battlestar Galactica launch tube. And one day we were talking after that project was completed, we were talking online, and he was telling me how much he's come to enjoy designing files for 3D printing. So we're just kind of kicking around different ideas for him to work on, and one idea I had was the Space 1999 hangar. Now there were files already available to print some of the walls from the hangar, but I figured maybe he could go a step further and design a little bit more of it so that the modeler could have a more complete display. Well, he took it on and started doing all kinds of research, and he quickly found out though that there were no blueprints available, so all the pieces that you see here were designed by him just going through all of the reference pictures he could find and doing what he could to replicate the look of the miniature. And I think he did a great job with that. Now the beauty of 3D printing obviously is you can print this to any dimension that you want. Bear in mind however, if you wanted to create this entire display for a 1/72 scale Eagle, it would be humongous. So I was just thinking, what would it have to be sized down to accommodate the little Eagles from the Moonbase Alpha model kit? And Marc spent a bit of extra time to size everything down because he thought that was a good idea. And that's what we have here, is everything's been printed to accommodate those little Eagles. Now the Moonbase Alpha model kit has been released a few times over the years, and when you open the box of the latest release, you'll find two sets of Eagles have been included now. One's larger, one's smaller. The larger of the two were the ones that were originally included in the kit in the 1970s, but it's just too large for the base. So they decided the last go around to include a second set, which are smaller and more in scale. So between the two sets, if you want to replicate what I'm doing here, make sure you're using the larger of the two. Now the model that I built of the Moonbase Alpha base is something that I had sold a long time ago, so I no longer had it, but I was able to find one on eBay for 20 bucks, had it sent out to me, and the model of course comes with 6 of those little Eagles. I wanted to have more Eagles, so one of the things that this project is going to include is another first for me, and that is resin casting. I've always wanted to try it, never really had a need for doing it, but this was a perfect opportunity to give that a shot. Okay, so what I have here now are 12 pieces. These are the pieces for the hangar, and you can see the additional Eagles here off to the side. But looking at the hangar pieces first, you can print this so that you would have 10 pieces, but I actually have 12 here. The reason I had to split these up is just by the way that they were designed. My bill plate wasn't large enough to print the entire piece, so I kind of split these up a little bit, so I ended up with some additional pieces. So what we have here are 12 pieces, and let me go ahead and show you now a close-up. You can see the pattern, these geometric patterns that were seen on the TV show have been replicated here, and we've got walls that go along the back, and that's what these are here. We have walls that will go on the sides of our display, again more of those geometric patterns. And then these are actually going to go in the middle, and these have these tiny little windows that you see here. So you could assume that these are just observation windows or platforms that you could look into the Eagle hangar with or from. And then we have the flooring here, which Marc has designed the files to include the tiles. And they're pieced together like this, and you can tell there are these little holes in the panels, and they were designed to accommodate these pegs that I've actually snipped off here, because what I ended up finding was the holes were not large enough for the pegs, and when I tried to drill them using a low-speed drill, unfortunately with resin like this it can be kind of brittle, and it ended up cracking a couple of the pieces. As you can see, one of them is still chipped off here. However, I decided not to reprint this because it's going to be a piece that is going to be hidden anyway as we mount our wall into place there. And this is just a close-up of the eagles that came with the model kit. These are the ones I used to cast the rest of these that you see here. Before we go on with the build, let me go ahead and show you how I went about doing that. So I've always wanted to try something like this. I'm going to use this mini casting kit here from Alumilite, and it comes with everything you need to create a small mold, and also comes with resin, of course. And the first two ingredients we're going to be using are these two here. You just mix these two together, and we're going to pour them into these cups that I'm going to be using for the creation of these molds. Now there's two molds I'm going to make here. One in which we just put the eagle into some clay. I'm going to pour the silicone over that, and it'll create a mold very similar to what you see here in the picture. Now by doing that, it is only going to create a one-sided casting, so the bottom will be kind of flat, and I'm just wondering if that's going to be enough. I mean, there are some details here you can see on the bottom side, but in our display you're not really going to be seeing that, and I'm just not sure how this is all going to work out, because I'm not positive it's going to sit quite right. So, but that is one method. The other method is going to be by creating what's called an envelope casting, in which case we'll be pouring some silicone into this, placing the eagle into that silicone, and then pouring more over that. Once that dries, we can cut it open with an X-Acto knife, take our original piece out, and it's into that I will be pouring some of the resin into, and that should create a two-sided replica like what we have here. So, as I said, I've never done this before. Let's go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. Okay, well, using these molds here, I was able to create these eagles here, and they are flat at the bottom, but I think that's going to be okay. They didn't come out quite as clean as I wanted them to, so I thought I would try another attempt here, and instead what I ended up buying is this kit here. This is this mold putty, and actually to make the mold you just take these two parts. There's a white part and a purple part. You just mix them together in equal amounts, kind of like using epoxy sculpt putty. And within about 15 minutes you get this rubbery mold. And I was able to press in the eagle deep enough now, and I'm hoping that we'll get a little bit more detail out of our replicas here. So you can see this has been about 20 minutes now, and you can see they pop right out. And there's this one here. So let's go ahead and pour some resin into these and see how these come out. We've got these two parts, and you just got to mix them in equal amounts. The kit came with these measuring cups, so I'm going to go ahead and measure them out. Pour them into here. You've got about 20 seconds to mix everything, and you have about 2 minutes to pour the resin into each of these molds. So I'm going to use this spoon to get the resin into each of these, and hopefully it'll be a little bit neater than what came out with these guys. Okay, we have about 20 seconds. I'm going to count to 20 here. Alright, let's move fast. And watch what happens with this here. It's going to start turning colors, and that means it's starting to harden. Well, guess what, guys? After all that effort of casting those eagles, I'm not going to end up using most of them. Something made me remember that I had some leftover eagles from that previous Moonbase Alpha model kit that I have since sold. And remember, these are one of two versions that are included in the kit. I end up using the smaller ones with that model kit. And when I have parts that are in good condition, I don't end up throwing them out. I just put them in a parts drawer, and this time I'm glad I did do that, because I am going to end up using those eagles. The ones I casted came out okay, but you know, the biggest challenge I had with the whole process were air bubbles, and I was forewarned about this, and no matter how hard I tried, more often than not I ended up with a little air bubble that resulted in a defect on those little eagles that I would have to fix. So I'm kind of glad I don't have to fix them or recast any more of those, but I decided to leave that part of the video in because it gives you a look at that whole system in case you're interested in using it. I know I was, so I'm glad I went through the process because it gave me the experience, but I'm going to end up using those other eagles instead. That's just how it goes sometimes. All right, let's go ahead and move onward. Okay, what I'm showing you now are two eagles that have these carriers glued onto them. I created these using these channel pieces from Evergreen Scale Models. Using a pin vise, I drilled a hole into each of them that were cut to the length I needed and mounted a styrene rod and a couple other pieces for detailing and glued them onto the eagles like you see here. Okay, moving on with our build, one thing I want to make note of is I originally intended to cover it with or mount it into this case here. I already purchased the case. I figured it would fit in here, but you know what? It's just slightly larger than this case, and the way these things are cornered off here, there's no way it's going to fit. So I have to set this aside and just not worry about a display case right now. I may eventually find something, but for now we're just going to move on. What I've done now is I've mounted it onto this block of wood because the flooring itself started to warp, and so I needed to mount it onto something to keep it from getting worse, and so now we have a nice straight solid surface again. Okay, so now before giving this a final paint job, because we're getting close to that now, I want to try to recreate that track system that they had on the show that they would use to move the eagles around the hangar. So here's a picture of it. And occasionally you would see this on the show in which they're moving the eagles from side to side and different locations along the hangar. And so what I have here is this channel piece, the same stuff I used to create the carriage that's going to be carrying the eagle. It's mounted on or resting on these other rods here that happen to be just the right width for the channel piece. And so that's what I'm going to do first, is have this stationary track that spans from one end to the other. And then to get the eagles to their parking spaces, if you will, I'm going to have this other track mounted that is going to imply that there is a secondary track here that moves along as the eagle moves along. And once you get to the position where you want it to be, the eagle just turns and moves on this second track. So it's going to be mounted perpendicular to this one. And then I'm going to scratch build something that's going to look like a mechanism that will be there in the center that is essentially what moves the whole contraption from side to side. And that's different than my original idea, in which case I was going to mount just 4 separate bars or so here and leave this side blank since I didn't have another wall on this side. This way, however, we can mount a system that you could see could be used for both sides. As I looked at more footage from the show, I noticed that there were red markings on the floor to designate the parking stalls, if you will, for the eagles. And so I went back to Photoshop and created some additional decals, placing them into position, as you see here. And I did apply a gloss coat just to protect it all, and I will tone that all down prior to finishing up the project. Okay guys, well it's time to get you caught up here with what I've been up to. I did not record making a lot of these little pieces of detailing here because it's just a matter of cutting and snipping styrene plastic, which is not too exciting to watch. I was conversing with Marc Fraley about the project, and after showing him what I'd done up to now, he suggested creating some extra detailing around the eagles just to make things look a little more interesting. And I thought that was a great suggestion. So what I've done now is I've just taken pieces of styrene plastic and just scratch built these little platforms. If you look at screenshots from the show, you'll see that there are platforms that surround the eagles. Now this was challenging to create because of the size here, so I did my best to just make some of these platforms that are shaped so that they fit around some of these modules and so forth. And I've used some wiring here to create the look of pipes or tubing there. And so what I'm going to do next is just paint these up, and I've created more for the opposite side. Now for the track system that I told you about, this is what it looks like now. I've added some detailing just to make it look a little more sophisticated than just plain rods here. What we've got then is this main track that is going to be parallel to the dots that you see on the floor, and we've got a secondary track that is perpendicular to that. And this track then will rest along this rod that I've placed on that side there. This is what it looks like, and I've painted it silver just to imply that there's a track that it rests on and glides along as it's moving up and down. At the center, I've created some extra detailing here as well, just to indicate that there are some mechanisms that slide along with the eagle as it goes along the individual tracks. Alright, so it's pretty much time to finish up the project by painting up these little details here and weathering them a little bit. And I'm going to install the track along with the eagle that will be suspended from it. Okay, I will show you the completed project then in just a second. Okay guys, well here we now have the 1/1600 scale model of the Moonbase Alpha Eagle Hangar, and the completed diorama measures 9.5 by 3.25 inches. The files for the walls and the flooring were designed by modeler Marc Fraley, who did an outstanding job. They are available at Thingiverse.com, and the link is below. Considering he had no real references other than pictures to go by, it looks very similar to the detailing we saw in the show. And by the way, I am also making the JPEG needed to create the decal sheet for this project to any of my subscribers if you're interested in attempting this build. So the pieces provided by the STL files include only the flooring and the walls. The rest of it had to be scratch built, with the exception of course of the eagles, which came from the Moonbase Alpha model kit. So let's go ahead and do a brief review of the build. First, let's talk about the eagles. These again are the larger of the two versions included in the last release of the Moonbase Alpha kit. The hangar is designed with these in mind, and they worked out perfectly. To finish and detail them, I first primed them with a light gray, then painted over with white. This was followed by a gray wash to accentuate the little details, and brought some of the white back afterwards by lightly dry brushing with flat white. When this is done, you can really see the small details on these little ships, and it's just incredible how much they included when they originally molded them. The engines were painted with Vallejo silver, and for a couple of the ships, I added red stripes, which of course are the markings of the medical eagles. Now to add more interest to our diorama, I scratch built some platforms and other detailed pieces to try to recreate servicing platforms and miscellaneous equipment around some of the ships and hangar. This was suggested by Marc, and I'm so glad that he did because it really does add to the diorama. The long flat pieces of these platforms were created using 0.1 inch by 0.06 inch strips of styrene, and to elevate them I place square pieces cut from 0.6 by 0.6 inch rods. To add a few other pieces in the background, I just pulled some pieces from my parts drawer. Now I wanted to add one major piece to our diorama, and that is the track that is often seen ferrying the eagles around the hangar. This was scratch built using 1/8 inch channel rod and detailed along the top with 0.03 by 0.04 inch rod along the length of it. For the mechanisms that I added here that are supposed to glide along with the carriage carrying the ship, I used the channel rod along with a piece of the 0.03 by 0.04 inch rod and a slice from a 0.100 inch rod to create what would be a flashing red warning light. The system has two tracks, one that is stationary, which runs along the length of the hangar. The other would be mobile and positioned perpendicular to the first. This mobile track rests on a beam along the far wall, and for this I use the 0.03 inch by 0.04 inch rod. My hope here was to create a design that looked like it would move the eagles in two directions, and I think I accomplished that. Now I have to add that this is completely my design since the actual track wasn't really seen in great detail, so there's really not much available to go by with creating something that would be accurate. And this slide lists all of the extra styrene pieces that I've described here. As for the colors, the walls are a mix of approximately 75% Tester's green zinc chromate, 5% Vallejo's yellow green, 5% Vallejo's cam medium brown, and 5% white. The floor was painted with a mix of 80% of MSP's wolf gray and 20% white. To detail the flooring, I created decals for the black dots and dashes, as well as the red stripes that designate the parking spaces for each ship. Again, a JPEG is available to allow you to print these for any of my subscribers. I used inkjet decal paper from Kodiak, sealed with a premium enamel gloss coating from Ace Hardware. And the last touch was adding this plaque that Marc designed for the project, which sports the Space 1999 logo. Alright, well that's a wrap for this project, and a big thank you to Marc Fraley for designing these files. If you want to gain access to those files, again, the link is below. It was a fun project to work on, and I ended up with a really nice piece to add to my Space 1999 collection. Now, regarding Space 1999, if you want to keep up on some of the latest stuff regarding the show, or at least stuff related to the show that's due to be released, because there's a bunch of stuff that's on the horizon here to come out soon, you might want to access a couple things. One is the Space 1999 props and ships. Now, this is a great resource for information, especially if you're in the middle of a Space 1999 related build and have a problem or a question. There's a good group of guys there that have built every model there is to build related to the show, and if you've got a question, no doubt they can answer it. The two guys that run the Facebook page are Todd Morton and Gordon Moriguchi, a couple of great guys there who are also accessible and accommodating, so check them out. Again, at Space 1999 Props and Ships. Now, Todd Morton also has a YouTube channel called Todd's Corner Sci-Fi Props and Ships, I believe, and I'll put the link below. But he does these segments called Todd's Corner, and oftentimes he'll do reviews related to sci-fi models, but also a number of them are related to Space 1999. And just recently they had someone there that they interviewed who makes Space 1999 costumes for cosplay. So if you're interested, for example, in getting something like that, just check out his channel and those videos. The link again is below. And I also would like to say a big hello to Mark H. from down in New Zealand. He's always commenting and leaving some really nice comments on the channel here, and a very loyal watcher of the channel. And he's always asking me when my next Space 1999 project is going to be featured. And well, there you go, Mark. I hope you enjoyed watching this one. All right, and then so coming up now on the channel is going to be the conversion of the Polar Lights 1000 kit to that tug configuration from the Franz Josef Technical Manual. I'm going to be using the Federation Models conversion kit for that. And I'm also excited to use the new circuit board that is available from HobbyLink International to light that one up. All right, well that does it again for this one. If you have any questions, feel free to comment here down below or email me at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.